So I've been asked to remake this video, 30 hits of LSD. Here's what happened is, I was working at this coffee shop back like 10 years ago on Mill Avenue in Tempe. And at the end of the night, I would put all the pastries and shit outside.
Originally I'm from Phoenix, but I moved to San Diego when I was probably 16, 15, right around there. So I've probably spent most of my life, well, about half of my life in Southern California, San Diego area, and the other half in Phoenix and in Washington State. I lived up there for about 5 or 6 years.
Do you have a favorite place that you've lived in?
I used to say San Diego, but it's kind of mighty expensive, and it's not quite what it was 20 years ago, but I still like Southern California, other than being super congested and expensive, very expensive. But I like Washington too, though. Not real big on Phoenix. So I went back a couple years ago to, kind of reminisce the old days, and I was just like, this place still sucks.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
when did like your journey becoming a psychonaut begin?
Man, I, um, I don't. It's kind of embarrassing to say it, but like pretty young, man. I was like about 14, man. And I was like, it was the weirdest thing, man. I ran away from home, and I met up with a bunch of people that were older than me, and then they convinced my mom because I had like drank Robitussin or something like that, or smoked some weed, and like convinced her that I was going to be a drug addict if they didn't send me to like this like drug reform, like drug rehabilitation thing that cost like $30,000, right? It was like for like rock stars, and I'm 14. Then I met all these like older people that were like in the 18, 19, 20, and they were talking about acid and all this stuff. I'm like, whoa, like this sounds fucking rad. So it had like the worst effect on me, man. I like I, like skyrocketed into drug experimentation at that point. But yeah, I mean, I just started a lot of acid, man, when I was 14 or 15, and you know, continued quite some time for several years after. I still do, but it's
Oh,
like we're talking. When I say quite a bit, I'm talking like I used to take acid and go to school, like every week, and like I don't know, I drop acid 2 or 3 times a week for about a year or two. So when I started doing acid, it was actually 1990, I think, 1990, 1991. Well, I think it's the same today because it's largely a generation, or not a generation thing, but like an age thing. Like when I was in high school, I had no problem finding it. But then when I got older, it became hard to find. And it was just like, yeah, but it was just one of those weird things, man, where if you found the right plug, like of all weird people, man, I was like digging on this chick, and like I'd follow her around and stuff, and like we both did acid and stuff, and then she like introduced me to like these fucking skinheads, right? And like the least people you would think like would be into psychedelics, right? These like big badass, like look like prison gangster Nazi swastika wearing skinheads. I was a little told, I was like, oh, but then like here's some acid, and it's like it was like giving me sheets of acid to sell at school and stuff. I mean, it was bad, but yeah. And so I just had like more acid than I even knew what to do with. I was giving the shit away. It's like, hey, this is free, but you got to do it right now with me. It was like one of those things. But yeah, man, I hear people like saying it's so hard to find. Like right now, it is kind of hard to find. Like I mean, I lost my plug, and it's like I haven't seen him for a couple months, and it's like I'm kind of like, 'cause it's like an age thing. Like so it's like the older you get, the harder it is. But if you're too young, it's kind of hard too. It's when I was selling acid in high school, I had so much that yeah, I wanted to take it every day, and I did sometimes. But I noticed that I'd have to almost double the amount if I did one day like one tab. The next day to get that same high, I'd almost have to take two, and then the next day I'd almost have to take four. And it got to the point where yeah, my body, you just get it's like kind of like an acid hangover is what I would call it. It's like you just become like but I call it Gumby because I felt like the Gumby character in Gumby. It's hard to explain, but for some reason when I was high, I saw Gumby and I related to that, and it always stuck with me. But yeah, just you kind of like mushy. Your brain doesn't work right. Your body's kind of real tired. You don't move right. And yeah, I mean, I recommend at least 3 to 4 days between trips. Now DMT is different. Like DMT, man, I hit that cart several times a day, every day if I got it. Like no shame in that, man. I'll hit that like several times, like I'll forget about it. And be like, oh, I still have that. Let me hit that. Just like I can't get enough of that. It's like a fat girl with chocolate. I mean, that's how I am with DMT.
would you say like weed counts as a psychonaut drug in some ways?
It does for a lot of people, man. For me, that's like one of the few drugs that I just won't fuck with anymore. It's like You know, I used to smoke weed daily, all the time. But the weed from the '90s, like the best weed from like the '90s, is like kind of shitty weed it is today. You know, it's like our skunk weed, our primo weed is like shit that people throw away nowadays. It's like you could sit and smoke a joint. Now it's like I take 2 hits off a joint and I'm just like in a different world. I'm like, okay, I gotta go sit down. Nobody fucking talk to me for at least an hour. You know, it's like worse than a bad trip on acid. I would rather take 3 or 4 hits of acid than 3 or 4 hits off of a joint, or especially like a dab or anything like that. Fuck that shit. That's like a narcotic to me, man. But that's just
Dang.
me. I can't handle it. It gives me anxiety attacks. Well, yeah, that's tricky. I have seen a couple people start to lose their shit. I mean, other than myself, that is. I've seen other people lose their shit. I've lost my shit, but I've seen other people lose their shit. I mean, it's kind of like dealing with like it really is circumstantial. It's kind of like dealing with somebody who's really drunk, you know, that obnoxious drunk where they're falling down, hold my hair, I gotta puke, and they puke in your car type drunk. It's kind of like that, but a little bit different. But you know, depending on the person and if they're like prone to like get weird, and a lot of people like over exaggerate intentionally. I don't know, man. It's like, but then you know, I'm always tripping balls too at the same time when I'm dealing with it. So it's like now I don't even know who's tripping. Am I tripping? Am I imagining? I don't know.
I know what you mean.
My suggestion is I always keep like some sort of benzos on hand, because that,
Mm.
you know, benzos and a good shot of booze. I know I'm not a doctor, and I know that
Uh-huh.
sounds deadly because it probably is, but I've ended many bad trips for myself that way. So I've recommended that to other people, and they've done the same. Or if you can't get benzos, um, Nyquil. Nyquil's your friend. Can be. I mean, I could sit here and say like you could try to rationalize something like, dude, it's just the drugs. You're gonna be okay. It's just a drug. But depending on how far gone they are, man, that rationale only works for so long. But that worked for me for a while. Um, you know, until you start to get really inside your head about death and all that stuff, and then you start to like go a little sideways. Yeah, you can try to rationalize with somebody or try to play some music. Distraction is good too. Distraction will pull people out of trips, like bad trips. I've seen some people go sideways and like, dude, what do you want to hear? What do you want to hear? You know, and Depeche Mode. Oh, okay, here. You know, it's like, all right. It's like, wait, the Cramps. All right, let's turn that up. You know, it's
Oh
like,
yeah.
you know, it's like Bad Religion, but that's probably not the best for the bad trip. But I mean, it was for me because I love Bad Religion. I love the Cramps. I love, you know, I'm kind of an old punk too, so it's like, you know, but yeah, whatever, man, whatever makes them happy and comfortable, and distraction's a great thing, you know. But
From your experience, I know everyone's different and stuff like that.
to me, man, they're very similar. To me, they're very similar. I
Mm.
mean, acid, it's hard to even explain the difference. I mean, it seems like acid seems a little more. It's kind of hard to understand, to really equate, but a little more speedy than shrooms. A little bit more, yeah, a little bit more of an amphetamine type feel to it. But I mean, as far as like, honestly, I mean, I would consider them to be like, you know, brother, sister, or cousins of the drug. I mean, it's not like other psychedelics, like DMT is radically different from shrooms or acid, but acid and mushrooms, I think, are, you know, go hand in hand. Like it's like, you know, wine and champagne. You know, I mean, it's pretty much kind of.
Do you feel like you've changed a lot as a person through psychedelics, and like what have you learned or uncovered? Like, would you say you would be the same person today?
You know, that's always a hard question, man, because we never know what we would be like if we didn't go down this road as opposed to that road, right? But I would definitely say it definitely, I'm not sure for the better or for the worse, but it definitely changed my perspective on things. And I noticed that right away, where I started to really start to question a lot of things around me when I started doing a lot of psychedelics. Well, not even a lot, but like, I mean, when I started to do them regularly, I started to like feel different, and I started to see things differently. I started to question like some convictions and some truths that I thought were truths, which I found were lies, or, you know, some things that I believed because I was told, was it when I, you know, from a child, you know. And I just started to really question everything around me, and I started to see things differently, and I started to see things not necessarily in a more negative light, but I was a lot more skeptical about certain things. But on the other hand of that, I was a lot more optimistic, and I had a lot more trust and faith and things that I thought were kind of mystical or nonsense or emotional things. Like, you know, I mean, I sort of try to identify with other aspects of life that I kind of took for granted or really didn't pay much mind to.
And if I am I pronouncing it right? Satanist and
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
Yeah, Satanist. So like things you grew up with, where there's certain beliefs that you were kind of like, that's not my thing. I guess, are you a spiritual person?
Uh, uh, Not really.
Hmm.
Not really. I mean, I was raised Catholic, but when I say that was kind of loosely Catholic, like we may have gone to Christmas mass once in a blue moon, but I wasn't really, I wasn't heavily indoctrinated into it. But at the same time, I mean, I don't know. I would like to say that psychedelics kind of help me break through that nonsense of organized religion and stuff. But I kind of actually started to lose my faith in God or question the reality and the whys and wheres of God well before psychedelics. I mean, I was still 10 years old, 11 years old. Um, I don't know. I think maybe I was just a little bit more experimental, not just with, substances, but also with ways of thinking that might have been considered to be a little bit taboo at the time. You see, at the time, I probably would have never got into Satanism except for something happened in the late 80s called the Satanic Panic. And that's when all these talk shows blew up, like Richard Ramirez, serial killers on TV. It was everything. All these rumors about Satanist acid baths where they disposed of the bodies because there was never any evidence that this was going on. So they had to make up this bullshit about there must be these acid baths where they kill all these people, rituals and cats, and they throw it in this acid bath. That's why there's no bones. And it's like, but it was so stupid. And all these people coming forward on these talk shows saying that they're like victims of satanic abuse. And it's like, what the fuck is satanic? Like it wasn't real well defined, except for like maybe Slayer, or whatever, and some pre-death metal bands, that were still, Venom, like playing with that idea. But today's a whole new thing, because I mean it changes a lot about every 10 years, I've noticed. Back then it was very taboo, even like in Phoenix, where I'm from, where at that time, I mean that's not really that conservative of a place. And I mean I wouldn't definitely, it's not as left as California, but it is somebody who would walk down the street back then with, like, say, an upside down cross necklace or an inverted pentagram, because maybe they're just a Motley Crue fan, right, or whatever, or a Slayer fan, or whatever. But that would catch eyes. That would be something that, like, maybe the clerk at the gas station would wonder, like, what the fuck is wrong with that kid? As you walk out the door, type shit. But nowadays, yeah, you're right. I mean, people just wear, whatever, because there's a million death metal bands, and just it's more, people have become more not susceptible, but more conditioned to it, to that type of flamboyancy of anti-religions or whatever. Well, that term, atheists in Halloween costumes, that is accurate to a certain extent, except for I'm not necessarily sure that all Satanists are starch atheists. I mean, I'm not. I mean, I don't believe in most Satanists. See, here's where it gets kind of confusing. It's confusing because of the name Satanism. Like, there's words that would more describe the philosophy than Satanism. But Satanism at the time, that was what he wanted to call it. And basically, yeah, Satan is a representation. It's not an anthropomorphic being, like a literal devil or literal being, or Satan, or not even an evil force. Like, Satan is more of a concept. It's a embodiment of ideals and principles, not that of evil or anything, or even necessarily anti-Christ, so to speak, but more so of rejoicing in life, of indulging in a lot of these things that are considered sinful by other organized religions. Is about focusing on yourself, about indulging, about making your life for you, and to live your life as if it's your only life, and to not worry about these taboos so much. I mean, within reason. We're not talking about pedophilia or rape or murder, nothing like that. Those are all ascribed to people, just like the Nazis said that the Jews did all that shit too. By the other side always says this about that side. But no, so Satanism is basically it's a life-affirming philosophy, and Satan also represents the adversary. He's also the judger, and we use these concepts taken in part from Christianity, which is why it's called Satanism, because Satan in Hebrew means the adversary. So it's going against the grain also, but it's also about independence, about strength, wisdom. As we know, Lucifer was the one questioned the will of God and said, "I will become my own God, above the stars of heaven," and was cast down for pride. Which there's nothing wrong with being prideful if you take pride in something that you're good at. I mean, but so I mean, it's kind of an embodiment and a concept and a philosophy. I wouldn't really call it a religion, although it was at the time. But I think a lot of people consider it more of a philosophy or a lifestyle. But you would be surprised, especially today, so many people who don't really identify with any religion or any philosophy, by listening to them talk or looking at how they live their lives, I would call Satanists, call them, de facto Satanists. They're people who would never call themselves Satanists, but people who kind of represent that embodiment what we ourselves as Satanists try to represent. So not really.
Hmm.
Not really. I mean, I was raised Catholic, but when I say that was kind of loosely Catholic, like we may have gone to Christmas Mass once in a blue moon, but I I wasn't heavily indoctrinated into it. Um, but at the same time, I mean, I don't know. I would like to say that psychedelics kind of help me break through that nonsense of organized religion and stuff. But I kind of actually started to lose my faith in God or question the reality and the whys and wheres of God well before psychedelics. I mean, I was still 10 years old, 11 years old. Um, I don't know. I think maybe I was just a little bit more experimental, not just with, substances, but also with ways of thinking that might have been considered to be a little bit taboo at the time. You see, at the time, I probably would have never got into Satanism except for something happened in the late 80s called the Satanic Panic. And that's when all these talk shows blew up, like Richard Ramirez serial killers on TV. It was everything. All these rumors about Satanist acid baths where they disposed of the bodies because there was never any evidence that this was going on. So they had to make up this bullshit about there must be these acid baths where they kill all these people, rituals and cats, and they throw it in this acid bath. That's why there's no bones. And it's like, but it was so stupid. And all these people coming forward on these talk shows saying that they're like victims of satanic abuse. And it's like, what the fuck is satanic? Like it wasn't real well defined, except for like maybe Slayer, or whatever, and some pre-death metal bands, that were still, Venom, like playing with that idea. But today's a whole new thing because I mean it changes a lot about every 10 years. I've noticed. Back then it was very taboo. Even like in Phoenix where I'm from, where at that time, I mean that's not really that conservative of a place. And I mean I wouldn't definitely. It's not as left as California, but it is somebody who would walk down the street back then with like say an upside down cross necklace or an inverted pentagram. Because maybe they're just a Motley Crue fan, right, or whatever, or a Slayer fan, or whatever. But that would catch eyes. That would be something that like maybe the clerk at the gas station would wonder like, what the fuck is wrong with that kid? As you walk out the door type shit. But nowadays, yeah, you're right. I mean, people just wear whatever because there's a million death metal bands and just it's more people have become more susceptible, not susceptible, but more conditioned to it to that type of flamboyancy of anti-religions or whatever.
So like someone who is kind of like religious or even agnostic, like they're just kind of curious about it. What would you kind of like describe a Satanist in your own words?
Well, that term, atheist in Halloween costumes, that is accurate to a certain extent. Except for I'm not necessarily sure that all Satanists are starch atheists. I mean, I'm not. I mean, I don't believe. Most Satanists, see, here's where it gets kind of confusing. It's confusing because of the name Satan. Like, there's words that would more describe the philosophy than Satanism. But Satanism at the time, that was what he wanted to call it. And basically, yeah, Satan is a representation. It's not an anthropomorphic being like a literal devil or literal being or Satan or not even an evil force like, Satan is more of a concept. It's a embodiment of ideals and principles, not that of evil or anything, or even necessarily anti-Christ, so to speak, but more so of rejoicing in life, of indulging in a lot of these things that are considered sinful by other organized religions. Is about focusing on yourself, about indulging, about making your life for you, and to live your life as if it's your only life, and to not worry about these taboos so much. I mean, within reason. We're not talking about pedophilia or rape or murder, nothing like that. Those are all ascribed to people, just like the Nazis said that the Jews did all that shit too. By the other side always says this about that side. But no, so Satanism is basically it's a life-affirming philosophy, and Satan also represents the adversary. He's also the judger, and we use these concepts taken in part from Christianity, which is why it is called Satanism, because Satan in Hebrew means the adversary. So it's going against the grain also, but it's also about independence, about strength, wisdom. As we know, Lucifer was the one questioned the will of God and said, I will become my own God, above the stars of heaven. I was cast down for pride, which there's nothing wrong with being prideful if, you take pride in something that you're good at. It's kind of an embodiment and a concept and a philosophy. I wouldn't really call it a religion, although it was at the time. But I think a lot of people consider it more of a philosophy or a lifestyle. But you would be surprised, especially today, so many people who don't really identify with any religion or any philosophy, by listening to them talk or looking at how they live their lives, I would call Satanists, call them, de facto Satanists. They're people who would never call themselves Satanists, but people who kind of represent that embodiment what we ourselves as Satanists try to represent. So, okay. Well, I did experience certain things like that. Ego death was kind of a scary thing, but also other feelings like being a part of a oneness, like being something outside of myself, which I guess this kind of falls into the ego death thing too. But
Like we're all connected, basically.
in a sense, yeah, I started becoming more interested in in like the collective unconsciousness theories of Jung and stuff like that, archetypes, and I started thinking on a deeper level. Like before I started doing psychedelics, I think I was more materialistic, or not even materialistic, but also more matter of fact. Like just more of like, okay, how does this affect me? I never really put any deep thought in anything. But as you know, if you're taking mushrooms, you can get into that era where you like to get real into yourself and really start thinking these deep thoughts about life, about our meaning of life, our purpose, where we fit. And I think that fucks with a lot of people and sends them into a bad trip, because you can kind of touch on some anxiety there, if you have some, and it's psychedelics did make me, I think, a more broader thinker, I guess maybe be a good word for it, instead of being so narrow-minded as in materialism and about, how am I going to make the most money? How am I going to be happy? Am I going to get this, I want this the prettiest wife, I want the nicest car, I want, what college am I going to go to? Those types of trivial things just didn't really seem as important anymore after I did a lot of psychedelics. I kind of started thinking like, well, what does it mean? Where will that get me? Will I be happy? What does it take to make me happy? Is this really necessary? Is this going to do it? I started to kind of think beyond the principles or the barriers that were set before me, which most people are kind of guided to kind of walk that way. But as far as the connectedness, there was during the 30 hits of acid thing, and I'm going to make a video about this. I posted a pretty lengthy Reddit post on it to help me kind of figure out how I was going to approach it. And I made old video about a similar experience I had under the influence of ACO4 DMT, which is, I guess, very similar to mushrooms. It's kind of hard to explain, but in a nutshell, I basically got like a feeling. I started to hear this like weird tone, like a very low, almost gruntal, mechanical, low tone, and I was able to concentrate on it more and more, and it got louder and louder. And then I started to feel it, and I started to kind of feel it coming. Not at first, I thought it was in my head, and then I started to feel it coming from things around me, organic things, plants, the dirt, stuff like that, things made of wood, even rocks. Anything that was earthly, and it kind of freaked me out a little bit, to tell you the truth, because it got louder, and it got to the point where I just described it as like, I felt like it was like the kind of the fabric of the universe, or the vibration of an echo as we were passing through this universe. But what I felt like it already passed, and we are just kind of part of it, and it wasn't a conscious necessary as we would think of it. It is far more evolved than that. It is kind of the fabric of the universe, and we're just kind of decaying matter as it falls to the side and grows life outside of it. And it kind of tripped me out, because it was, I think it's, so the interconnectedness, that we were just part of it, we were part of one, but it doesn't really care for us. It is just, the only purpose is to grow and to expand, and it causes destruction, death, and life within its process, then leaves that behind us. And our place in its dimensions and times are kind of the echoes of where it is going, kind of like a sonic boom would spread. We're kind of the fragments of the chaos behind. It was more like kind of like a Lovecraftian, if you're familiar with that, those like Cthulhu type, the old ones, stuff like that, kind of like in that sense. And that may have been maybe why I went into this trip to begin with, because I was reading Lovecraft. So that could very well be. But I felt like I was, kind of in touch with one of the old ones, and it was kind of a scary feeling. Kind of freaked me out a little bit. But
Yeah.
I thought I'd mention this, like, to make sure that this concept and this Lovecraftian concept of it and our what I experienced during the trip, I basically, so I would never forget it. I got the whole tattoo of it, which is, it's kind of hard to see in this, but it's
Oh, that's that your tattoo is based on that's pretty cool. I like the red in that.
right, and it's like, and it goes up, and it's a Cthulhu kind of being, and it's people mistake this as a Nazi symbol. It's not. It's a sun wheel. Kind of looks like a black star, but that's 12 spokes. It's a little bit different. But this is like the nine legs, or the planets. And this is a supermassive black hole in the center that's kind of sucking us all in, and it's just kind of encompassing the life cycles of our universe. But yeah, I mean, it was kind of I got that so that I would remember what, because I don't know about you, but like, I mean, I often forget my trips. Like, I think I've like discovered like the mysteries of the universe, and then a day after I sleep, I'm like, did I go to 7-Eleven? I can't remember. It's like I can't remember the simplest things. Like, I didn't know I smoked menthols. What the fuck is this? I mean,
That
but
is
yeah.
pretty crazy and stuff
Or
like that.
aliens, though, man. I've always been a believer in aliens, but wasn't really sure. I mean, I believe that aliens were there, but whether they had been here or not, all the whole, the back engineering stuff like that, I was kind of skeptical. But I believe that, yeah, there's probably intelligent life in this giant universe, and it's kind of egotistical to think that we were the only ones, right? That's kind of silly, since we now know that there are hundreds of billions of stars, right? Which means there's infinity amount of planets. Like, this isn't the only Earth. But so I was delivering pizzas, and I was like, I don't know, I think it was 1997, 21. Yeah, I think it was 97, 94. I think it was 97. Anyway, I saw the Phoenix lights. When I was in Phoenix, I think it was in 94. Basically, I was driving around, and like, people were stopping, and it was like right around evening time, 5, 6. People were stopping like on the street, like the main streets, and they're pulling over and stuff. And I thought, I was jamming out some tunes, man. Listening to some Black Flag or something. I was like jamming down, and like, so I turned the music down. Like, what the fuck? Like, a fire truck was coming. No, and people were getting out of their car and looking up. So I'm like, oh shit, something's up there. I couldn't really see. So I got out, man, and sure as shit, the Phoenix lights, and it was, what I saw, along with, I don't even know how many thousands of people, because it was like broad, it was like dusk, dusk, but it was like, I saw like 7, 8 lights, and they were kind of a boomerang type shape, and it was kind of transparent, like you could tell there was something connecting these lights. They weren't flares, they weren't individual lights. It was like a lights on the front of a boomerang, but as it went, and it wasn't going very fast either. As it went, it would like kind of take a solid form, but then it would kind of become translucent. And then you would like second guess yourself, like, what are those fucking lights? Flares, or not flares, but individual lights. And then you'd see it again, and it'd be like a shape, like it was almost like it was like cloaking and uncloaking, kind of like that, like when you see like in Star Trek when they come on and come out. It was kind of like that.
Were they huge too? Like huge structures?
It was one craft. It was definitely one solid piece. I don't know if it's split into pieces, or I don't know, but the times when I saw it, it looked like one giant piece. Oh, it's huge. It was. I mean, it's hard to judge from that distance and trajectory, but I would say it would probably be, I don't know, 100 times bigger than an airplane, than a 747. So it was definitely big.
I've heard of that too. Like, I know like thousands and thousands of witnesses have seen it. Basically, the whole city of Phoenix saw it. So
yeah, pretty much everybody that was outside saw it, because if you were, I mean, it was that big, and it was that obvious. Where, I mean, like, if you were outside, then you probably saw it, unless you were like looking down at the ground the whole time. Yeah, well, yeah, this was before fentanyl, so it was with the area back then, on Mill Avenue in Tempe was kind of like it was a big hangout. Like, a lot of high school people came in, but also there's a lot of squatters. Like, so when I say homeless, they may not have necessarily have been homeless as we think of, like, the real homeless person, but they may have just been like more like traveling, like psychedelic festivals, like squatters. Maybe they all lived in a bus or something. You know what I'm saying? But a lot of them, we call them squatters because you'd see them sitting on the same spot. A lot of them, panhandle, where they'd sell like their art and stuff like that, or play some music. They're basically hippies. They're hippies. We call them squatters or gutter punks sometimes. But yeah, I mean, they were just kind of street kids. And yeah, I knew I had bought acid before from the dude, so it's like I knew him, like so had a little bit of trust in that sense. And yeah, I mean, that was just like his way of showing his generosity, I guess. I mean, as far as putting the food out, yeah, I mean, I knew them well enough that I was like, hey, all you had to do is tell one guy, hey, there's like 20 fucking Danishes in this fucking bag next to this trash can. Why don't you get them before my boss comes, and sees them, and then sees that I'm feeding everybody, they'll think they're just in the trash. So.
Oh yeah, that's cool, and yeah, that's definitely pretty chill. And so, was he? So you said in the video like he was already super high. Would you say like that kind of like really affected his depth perception and getting in your mouth?
I think so. I think so. I like to believe he didn't do that intentionally to give me that much. I think he wanted to give me a decent amount, but I think he was just really high, and we were kind of walking as he was doing it because I was slowing down, but he was kind of walking faster than me. He was kind of like on the fly. Like there's bad judgment on his call, but I mean, there was bad judgment on my call too to trust that. But because I had bought something from him before, I didn't think he'd put more than a couple, 2 or 3 in there, right? I didn't realize that, I don't think he meant to. I think it was more like, one of those things where maybe felt that driver slipping a little bit, and so he tried to squeeze it to keep it like from dropping on the floor, and it happened. Hard to say, man. It was dark, and it's hard to say what he was thinking. But see, he was always fucked up. Like he was always high. Like I'd never seen the guy not fucked up, so I don't even know, man.
That's funny. I mean, so like, what did it taste like? Did it like taste like anything? Because I know it was like just like solid mass of acid. I bet.
Well, it was weird. It didn't even taste like when you say nothing. It's like a lot of people might think, oh, so it tastes like water. It's like no, water actually tastes like something. Water tastes like water. I mean, it has certain minerals and flavors to it. I mean, not a lot, but water has a distinct taste. This didn't really taste like anything. It wasn't sour, wasn't sweet. It didn't taste like water. I could tell it was a liquid because I could feel it. That's how I knew that I was like fucked, because I could feel quite a bit, like enough that like I kind of had to like almost had to swallow a little bit. I was like, what? That's not fucking cool. And I was hoping that he was gonna say, just joking, dude. Like put some like water, right? But
Did you like see the fear in his face? Like, oh man, like or
not really, man. I mean, a little bit, but almost like a Cheech and Chong fear, like, oh, you're gonna get it. It was like he may have been like a little startled at first, like but it immediately rolled into like kind of chuckles and like you're gonna be high. It's like.
well, you would say that you were kind of like a professional at this point with it. Like, have you done pretty big doses of acid before?
At that time, I think the biggest dose. I think I don't even think I had done a 10 strip at that point. I had done some pretty hefty doses, but I mean, I don't think I had done a 10 strip at that point. I think the most I've probably done is like 5 or 6. So yeah, I mean but I had done that several times. So I was 5, and that was about my limit. That's about where I stopped, was 5 or 6. Like, yeah, that would back then though we didn't know. Like, well, I'm sure that they existed, but to test there wasn't really test kits available, not easily available to the public anyway. So when I say a hit, I mean a tab, right, on a piece of paper, a little square tab. I don't know if that was 50, UG, or could have been 150. Like, what I'm saying? So it's real relative. I mean, yeah.
Like, would you say there's like a point where there's just so much acid that you just don't get high even more higher?
Yeah, well, they say that there's a ceiling, which is what that means, right? Like, after a certain point, it's kind of wasted because you can only absorb so much. I don't really know if that's true, because I know that 30 hits, we call it 30 hits, but it's probably 20 to 30 hits. That's what the guy said. So I don't really know. I mean, even then, but I know that was significantly stronger than 10 hits. So, but then you think, like, again, back to how many what a hit is on a tab. Is that 50 UG? Is that 150 UG? I don't know, because that can make a huge difference, right? I mean, I don't know. I mean, because it was never, it was never tested, so we don't really know.
How long
But
is a trip usually for like 1 hit or 5 hits of acid?
Well, that's weird. Like what you read online, I don't really agree with because like I usually even on one hit, like let's say 100 UG. And now maybe this has to do with age. I mean, maybe it lasts longer the older you get because your brain's softer. Who knows? But um, for me, man, I mean, I'll feel the residuals even off of one tab. I'll feel that for good 16 hours. If it's decent. I mean, granted, the last maybe 8 hours of that, 6 hours of that are fairly more mild, but I mean, I'm definitely still high. And some people say like, oh well, according to this, it's out of your system within 24 hours. You can't trip longer than 18 hours because of your liver. This and that. Okay, well that's what it says, but I mean, are they doing this on someone who takes way more than what they come up with these numbers for? Because I was high for a couple of days. When I say high, though, I mean like the residual part lasted for a solid day and a half. I didn't sleep, and it was just like, so it's like I don't know, but yeah. I sat it out, man. I sat it out because I couldn't find my way home, and that's when I realized that I gotta sit because I don't even I got to the point where I couldn't see anymore. I felt like cars coming by and stuff. I couldn't judge the depth distance, and it got to the point where I couldn't tell if it was even day or night still because the lights were just amplified up by everything. Um, I eventually just sat it out. I remember the sun coming up, and I was still so high I couldn't walk. Remember that? Couldn't really see much, and eventually it got to the point where I felt comfortable enough to kind of crawl. But I remember crawling. I had my hands kind of on the ground, so I needed to make sure that it was like solid. I was so used to sitting next to the canal. I had this weird feeling that I was gonna get sucked into it. But
Would you recommend it to anyone?
nah, man, I think that was just way too excessive. I mean, if somebody really, really wanted to like, blast off, there's better ways to blast off than take that much acid, man. Like I'm a big proponent of DMT now because you I've blasted off on DMT way harder than 30 hits of acid. And I don't know why. It's just the nature of the beast. But I think with the acid, it's like it gets to the point where I think it might be counterproductive. Like whatever you're trying to do, like I think it might get to the point where you take too much. It's like drinking. You can drink a 6-pack of beer, and you can be just right that great. I'm happy, fun, drunk. But double that or triple that. Now you're like puking in the toilet, you can't get up. That type of, you know what I'm saying? It got to the point where that much excess, it was too excessive. I mean, for me, a 10 strip is even excessive. Like that's the point where I'm starting to kind of question my sanity at that point. But I like the most I like to do is about 4 or 5. Anything pushing past that to me is excessive. That's just for me. I mean,
So with acid, like for a beginner, what would you recommend for like how many UGs? I guess that's the correct term for it. I guess.
okay. If we were to say a tab, like okay, for UGs, if we're going to just say the average tab would be 100 UGs, I would say like to do 1 to 200 the first time because it's like I don't know, like I was disappointed the first couple times I did acid because I was so cautious. I was like, I don't want to take too much, and it's like maybe it wasn't that good of acid though. I don't really know. Maybe some people have different experience, but my experience was I regretted the first couple times I took it because I was only taking like I'm just going to take half a hit. I'm just going to take one tab. Then it was like, oh, okay, well, that's a taste. But I was like, oh, but I want those visuals. I want the fucking mushroom guy to come out in Mario Brothers. I want to see that shit. And so then I was like, okay, I'm just gonna do it. I took like 2 or 3, and then I was like, okay, that's what it's about. And then I got up to eventually like 5 or 6, and then it started to get a little scary. And I was like, okay, I'm just gonna stay around here.
So it's definitely about experience.
Mushrooms are great, man. Mushrooms are Dude, I love mushrooms too, man. Mushrooms don't seem to last as long as acid. That's another thing that I remember. But dude, I've lost my shit on some mushrooms, man. I took like 5 grams once, and I didn't really know how much I was taking. It's one of those things where they're really big mushrooms, and it's like and it took a long time to kick in. Usually, these are the little stem ones, little blue ringers and stuff.
Yeah.
And these are big ones, like the size of like a finger, and I was just like, so just eating them as I'm talking. I'm like, I was doing them with somebody who'd never done them. And so I like wanted to make sure that she got like really high, like got a good experience. But I didn't realize that usually you would think like 30, 45 minutes, like over an hour passed and we're not feeling it. So I'm thinking, fuck, man, we got some bunk shit. And then all of a sudden I'm just realizing how much we ate. I'm like, we might stop around here. And then, of course, then it, slowly kicked in. And I was like, oh shit, ramped up. And it was like, that's it. Put your seatbelt on.
Dang. So this was her first experience with it and stuff like that. So that was quite a good intro.
With mushrooms? Oh no, no, I've been doing mushrooms a long time before that.
Oh, your friend.
Oh yeah, my friend. Yeah, yeah, that was her. Yeah, that's a whole. I made a video about that. That's a whole other story. That'd be a lengthy story to go into, but it was definitely an interesting time. Acid does that to you too, man. Acid gives you gas too, man. I don't know why, but it's like mushrooms do it too. But I don't know what chemical if it is. But I used to think it was just mushrooms because I thought, oh, because they're growing cow shit or whatever. It's probably fungus. But acid does the same thing to me, if not worse, man. It's like I'm
Mm.
blasting off for like a good day or two after I take a bunch of acid.
Sid?
It's hard to say, man. It's hard to say. I don't think there's. I mean, the HPPD or whatever that is, HDDP, whatever it is called. I know what you're talking about. I do believe there's some truth to that because I did notice that when I was started taking acid at the beginning. I noticed that like the tracers and stuff were that I only noticed when I was doing acid. Now I notice like full time, or and I noticed that they wouldn't go away after a day or two. They'd stick with me for like a week or two. And I don't know, like now, if what I'm seeing is normal, if I'm just, used to it now after 30 years, it's like, I think I might just be used to it, but it doesn't affect me. It doesn't affect my ability, my coordination, or it doesn't, I mean, doesn't really affect my daily living. I think you adjust to it, maybe. I'm not sure. But as far as frying the brain goes, possibly. I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, we've all met some people who've just done too many drugs, and you could just tell by the talk, right? But I don't know. I don't know if that's from psychedelics. Then again, though, I've met people who smoke way too much weed for way too long, man, and like these guys can barely tie their fucking shoes. So I think a lot of that has to do with the person's constitution. Where if you have stronger constitution to start out, you can take a few harder hits than most people. Where if you have some weak spots, maybe you'll get knocked down that much faster. But yeah, it's
So
hard to say, man.
you would say like the drugs that definitely like diminish people are kind of like cocaine and stuff like that, like amphetamines compared to like s- uh, psychedelics, hallucinogenics, and stuff like that.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think the psychedelics are probably in the more safer category. I don't want to say safe altogether, but I think they're they have the least harmful long-term effects. But the amphetamines, and even like your heroines, your super depressed. But even alcohol is a pretty good one too. Alcohol, tears someone down pretty fucking fast too if they're a heavy drinker.
You had a seizure. I remember watching a video of one of yours. You had like, is that like even like, did you go like cold turkey? I forgot, just from alcohol.
Yeah, yeah. I struggled with drinking tried to quit drinking for a couple of years because I had gotten to the point where I was, getting pretty heavy into drinking. And then I started I had to drink in order to keep from being sick. And then you get into a bad cycle where you have to drink otherwise. And I just, got sick of being sick every day. And so I quit a few times, I had some medicine from the doctor. Sometimes I didn't. Yeah, man, I just started having seizures and like I felt fine, like day 3, day 4, no drink. I felt fine. I was actually feeling better, then all of a sudden, boom, I was driving a car, wake up behind the telephone pole, wrapped around a telephone pole. What the fuck happened? Walking through the grocery store, wake up and there's paramedics over you, like looking at you. It's like, it's like, so yeah, alcohol is right up there. I'd say probably in the top 3 worst drugs to be dependent on, or to heavily abuse. Because that wrecked me pretty good for a while. No, no, man. With the one with the AC4 DMT I did, but I guess they equate that more chemically as like mushrooms. Um, I don't know. They call it for ACO DMT. Maybe it's a synthetic form. I'm not really sure. Not really that knowledgeable on it. But just the regular DMT. Yeah, man. No, I mean, it's the point when you blast off, you don't even know what happened. Like it's like going like snapping like instant dream world. Like remember like Nightmare on Elm Street movies, where it's like they fall asleep and like boom, they wake up and it's like they don't know what's going on. Like there's like displaces your body, displaces your whole mind, and like wake up and then when you talk about ego death, like that was weird. Like I've had some scary experiences on DMT where your ego was like, well, I woke up, well, I hit the pipe, got a good hit, sat down. Within a few seconds, I woke up in a hotel room, and I heard these voices, and they're coming like from like windows in the hotel room that were high up, saying like, "Oh no, he did it now. No, he didn't. Oh, we told him not to do this. He's gonna regret this one." And I was like, "What the fuck's going on?" And I'm like, "I gotta get out of here, right?" And then they're like, "Ha ha ha, you did it now." And then like I heard the like video game music, like when a character dies, like old school like Nintendo, like and like all of a sudden like I started like my body started falling apart, my teeth fell out, and I was like literally like decaying. Like it, I didn't. I mean, you hear these cool stories about people like gliding with aliens and shit. Not me, man. My DMT trips are usually pretty fucking horrifying. It makes me think twice about doing it again, or you wake up and like, I'm never doing that again. But but then I always do. After about a week or two, I get over it.
Dang, and do you still do it by like a vape and stuff? Like, cause I know like it's quite an interesting process of it. So like, do you like mix it with like vape juice basically?
That's one way to do it. That's a way to do. That's my preferred way to do it. Just because I like to be like I don't always I really rarely don't want to blast off. Like once in a blue moon, I'll blast off. Like just do like a mega dose like that. But otherwise, I just like to kind of like be outside, take a good hit or two where it's like everything just fucking comes alive, and it's like going from 0 to 60, but like within a couple seconds, and all of a sudden you're tripping balls. But the great part about it is it only lasts for 10 minutes. So it's like unlike acid or shrooms, where if you take a real dose of those, man, you're in it for a ride, man. You're in it. You might as well have. You better hope you got nothing to do for at least 24 hours. For DMT, it's like you can take the massive amount of hit of DMT, and within 15, 20 minutes, you'll be back to your normal self, which is I kind of like that. I like to be able to like, on my lunch break at work, be like walk over to the beach and just hit that. It totally changes my mood. Like I could be in a bad mood, hit that, and all of a sudden it's like, you know, just like it's like an instant antidepressant. It really is for
Jeez,
me.
and have you yeah, have you ever felt like any uh like physical problems from it at all or anything?
Not from psychedelics, other than
Hmm.
what we mentioned, having like some intestinal issues for the next day, but that's really about it. I haven't really noticed anything from psychedelics at all. Like in the 30 hits video, I did say at the end of that, I have this tick now. That was the only part of the video that wasn't true. And threw that in there as a joke. And some people knew that I was joking because you kind of tell. Some people didn't, but I did it because I didn't think anybody would watch it if it wasn't funny. So I'm like, I got to like make this funny somehow. Like I got to throw at least one joke in there so people go, oh, otherwise I'm just telling another boring story. So, but yeah, no, I've never noticed. I mean, sometimes like after acid, my joints will be a little sore, my muscles will be a little sore, neck cramps, but that all passes within a day or two. I mean, I've never had any long term effects other than the HTTP or whatever HPPD and even that is mild, man. So I don't know. Like I've never had a flashback. Never had a flashback. I wish. I mean, I keep hoping that I'm just gonna like be walking around one day and be like, oh, I'm fucking high as fuck.
Well,
What
for
happened?
people who don't know, what's a flashback basically?
A flashback is like when all of a sudden you feel like you're on acid just out of the blue for no reason. Like somehow your body just releases the LSD and all of a sudden you start tripping for no reason. That's the rumor, but I've never had one. And I think if anybody would, I mean, I probably tripped, not to count the actual hits, but I've tried to do both. But I've tripped well, just on acid. I'm not talking about shrooms and DMT, probably over 150 times. So you think that if anybody would, it probably, I would be a good candidate for it, but I've never had one. Keep waiting.
Thanks. So, would you say that they help you in your social settings, like DMT and acid could help you has helped you like socialize, or is that like a thing that kind of just makes you not talk at all? Because for me, if I'm on shrooms, I can't talk at all. It's just very like I'm very mute.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of one of those weird social drugs where it's fun to trip with other people, but it's hard to communicate. It really is. I have the same problem. I come a loss of words. I start to kind of trip over my words, and I get lost in my thoughts, and it's hard to focus. Like I can't even use a cell phone when I'm high on acid. It's like I like you become completely mental degenerate in certain ways, but in other ways, it's really cool. I'm more like I like to kind of trip by myself, but sometimes I'm in a big crowd, but I'm more like to do it by myself.
What's that place called in San Diego? The farmers market, like where people trip together and stuff like that, by the San Diego beach. Do people still do that? Is that like is the community pretty? How's the community like out there? I guess when you go to that and stuff.
The community definitely has a very hippie vibe to it. Yeah, it's a farmers market, and the event is at the end of it when they're all tearing down. When the sun's going down, there's a grassy knoll at the end of the street, Newport Street, where it hits the beach. and it's like where the lifeguard tower is, and it's just a big grassy knoll. And people sit out there, and they have like drum circles, drums start playing and stuff, and people juggling fire, stuff like that. It's just real, like, you know, kind of what do they call it? Kind of beatnik, kind of like a beatnik, kind of like hippie-ish type thing. I mean, it's cool, yeah. And people, I mean, it's not like people aren't like standing on the corner, you know, openly eating shrooms, but you can tell who's pretty fucking high around there. You know, I mean, I can anyway. It's fun, you know. And it's like, you know, the people ask me all the time, oh, where are you gonna go? You know, give me a plug. And that's like, I'm not selling drugs online, no way. But if you want to go and you're in this area, I would start there. Just look for the hippies, look for who's high, talk to them. Yeah, but it's pretty accepted out here, man. Like psychedelics, I don't know about in LA, but out here, I think it is a California thing, actually. I mean, psychedelics have been decriminalized, including DMT, where like you can't sell it, but personal amounts, if you count personal amounts, is no longer a criminal offense. So it's become more lax, and that's just the first step in like making medicinal use, which I think is still it's on its way. But so yeah, I think the community around here, San Diego's the difference between San Diego and LA. LA is more uptight. LA is more busy. San Diego is more of a beach community. It's a huge beach community, but it's more, has more beach atmosphere, kind of like what, say, like Newport Beach maybe would be. You know, it's kind of has that vibe to it, or Long Beach, kind of like that.
I mean, homelessness in Los Angeles is a really big problem too, as well. And what drugs would you say that they are doing that gets them to this part? Because that, yeah.
The number one, hands down, is meth. The 98% of all the homeless people out here, meth. And then number two would be fentanyl. Those are the two ones that 98% of all the homeless people out here are addicted to one, if not both. The fentanyl people typically don't last a long time. They typically die. In 1 month, I knew like 8 homeless people had died. It was like they got a strong batch, I guess, of fentanyl, so they're used to taking like 2 hits to get high. You know, now they can get that high in 1 hit, so they still took 2 hits, thinking it was like the last batch they got, and they killed them. So it's but yeah, meth is definitely the leading cause of homelessness, I would say. It used to be alcohol, like before meth got real big. Like, you know, you had your wino, right? I was a wino. Don't get me wrong, there's definitely some winos and some drunks, but that's almost got overran by meth. Meth has a weird effect too, like people who are alcoholics and winos and stuff. Like if they got turned on to meth, all of a sudden they're no longer a wino. Like it just kills the ability to drink, like the desire to, which is weird, because like the doctors won't tell you that the pills that they prescribe you to get off alcohol, like the antabuse type pills and the other pills to reduce your cravings, don't fuck. I mean, not for me. That didn't. Most people I talked to, like when I went to AA, it didn't work either. But for some strange reason, amphetamines in general, but especially meth, it takes away the desire to drink, even in the hardest of alcoholics. And I don't know why that is, but I've talked to a lot of people, and it's true. I'm not saying like if you're an alcoholic, you should start smoking meth. I mean, you trade one demon for the other, but you know, it is a fact. You know, I know a lot of people who beat alcoholism by putting a little bit in their coffee every morning. You know, instead of like, you know, doing it other ways, just instead of a little cream, a little meth. It sounds funny, but hey, they're not drunks anymore. Yeah, digesting it seems to be lasts longer, but it's not as intense, and it's more of a body high. Whereas smoking it's kind of like the difference. Well, not really, but it's kind of like with cocaine. There's different ways of doing cocaine. You can do a line of cocaine, or you can smoke crack. Like you know, eating meth or snorting meth is kind of like that, as opposed to smoking meth. Smoking meth is more intense, but it doesn't last as long. But it gives you a higher feeling of euphoria, as opposed to snorting it or eating it. But it's probably also more dangerous. And then there's people who shoot meth because they're just fucking retarded. But you know, the whole spun thing is typically someone who does meth on a regular basis won't be able to focus long enough to like really accomplish one task. Like they'll typically have like 6 or 7 things going on at once, because one, they don't sleep, 2, because their brain is going so fast, but it's going too fast to make any sense, or to stay focused long enough to follow anything through. So they have all these like, you know, half projects. And so they'll be over here fixing this bicycle, then also they'll be over here like fucking with this phone, you know, and then they'll be over here trying to do this. And it's like, it's spun. It's like you're going in a circle, but you're not getting it. And that kind of, people will do that for years. And you'll see them in the same cycle, like the same circle, and they don't really break the cycle. They just kind of go in a circle, and they don't really ever get out of being homeless or get out of whatever they're trying to get into or get out of, it just kind of goes round and around and around and around. And it's like,
Is Molly pretty similar to that? Like, 'cause I know Molly is like a type of amphetamine and stuff like that.
I did that. Those drugs kind of confuse me because like ecstasy and Molly, I think, are two different drugs, right? But I've heard people interchange those terms. Like when I bought what I thought was ecstasy, and it wasn't the same ecstasy that I took in the '90s, where you're like, "Oh, touch me." It wasn't that type of ecstasy. That's the type of ecstasy I wanted. But then I got this shit that was like speed. I'm like, "What the fuck is this? You sell me meth?" I was like, "No, it's Molly." Like, I'm pretty sure this is meth. No, it's Molly. Like, I think Molly is a code for meth. You just don't want to call it meth because of the stigma. It's fuck. No, it's Molly. Okay, so I don't fucking know. It just seemed like shit.
Is there like any way to leave an impact, or should they just be left to self-destruct?
That's a tricky question. That is a loaded question. Like, part of me wants to say, Satanism also is a good proponent for stratification. Darwinistic, the strong will survive and the weak will fall. Let water find its own level. That is one of the proponents of Satanism. But at the same time, it's not that you should be unempathetic, because I do look at drug abuse and alcoholism, whatever, as a sickness. And it is a sickness. It can be treated, but it's a tricky problem because how much resources are you willing to, put forward in time to try to treat someone who probably doesn't want to be treated? These homeless people, I think most of them know, although if you ask them, they'll never tell you that it's because of meth. They'll have some fucking cockamamie story about how they got fucked over, about this and that. But the common denominator is meth, right? And so it's like they'll never say that. But it's like, so they don't really want to get sober. And with people who do meth regularly, time goes by so fast. It's like the days, I'm saying, a week will go by as a normal day would to somebody who's not. A month will go by and it'll feel like a week. So time just accelerates so fast that's part of being spun too, where I don't think they're not sober long enough to step back and be like, whoa, what am I doing? It's now fucking 2024. I've been living under this bridge since 2021, doing the same shit. They don't, it's like, it's also, meth is a weird drug because it's also probably one of the most antidepressants that I've ever used. Like, it's instant too. It's like, unlike pills that you take for 2 weeks and they may or may not work, may gain weight, your dick may not work, which will really make you depressed, by the way. But meth, just the opposite. It's like it's like instant antidepressant. Like, you could be having a bad day, you can do whatever. I mean, and it'll skyrocket your libido, it'll skyrocket your creativity and productivity at first. But when you start to abuse it and you get used to it, then it can have just the opposite effect of being spun, where you can't focus long enough to get anything done. You're going in a circle, you can't hold a job, shit like that. But that's to be said with any drug. Like, even heroin addicts will say the same thing. Like, at first it's fucking great, this euphoria, it's just a bliss feeling. Now it's like, a year later, they're not the same.
So there's
I think that most people, like, when they see people who are homeless, like, I have kind of an intimate experience because I chased somebody around trying to save somebody for a couple years, and who was homeless, and so I was in the thick with a lot of these people, like, talking to them, going into encampments, and kind of like spending a lot of time in these canyons where a lot of them stay and stuff like that. And I was seeing things that, like, I would never put together, like just driving down the street and seeing a guy pushing a shopping cart, or seeing a guy trying to light a meth pipe with a fucking matchbook behind CVS or whatever. That's what I would see. I was like, oh, another homeless guy. But then when I went down to these canyons, it's like, holy shit. There's like actually a lot more people down there. A lot of people have electricity. There's like little fucking cities they built, little underground tunnels, like little communities, man, like that you don't see because they don't want you to see it. And it's kind of interesting, when you talk to them, you instead of like, I would have an attitude like, oh, just fucking homeless people. It was like, I just kind of dismissed it as like, everybody, the homeless people, all drug addicts, whatever. And some of that is accurate. Almost all of them are drug addicts. But I started seeing them as more individuals. And the way that their perspective on things was unique. And I think having to be on the streets like that and having to survive like that does definitely give you a different perspective on life and, what we take for granted and stuff. But it also shows you the creativity and resourcefulness of some of these people who have built these underground cities that elude law enforcement, that are solar powered, They have power. They have TVs. They have fucking cool shit, man. It's like, and it's like, it's hard to even explain. It's like, shit, I wish I could think of a movie that would, but yeah, I mean, it just tripped me out. I was just like, whoa, I never expected that this, person created this, this person asking me for a cigarette, when I walk out of 7-Eleven is responsible for digging these fucking caves underneath these highway overpasses that are completely powered by solar. Or this guy, he just built this pontoon boat. He calls it his yacht. And it's like, but it reminds me of like, it's a big version of like Castaway, Tom Cruise. Well, son, like that fucking, but they do that shit and they float around these fucking bays and shit. It's crazy, man. It's that creativity of people who are on meth can get kind of weird too. It's like, why would you build a raft out of these fucking stupid sticks? That doesn't make any sense. Because it's all PCV pipes, man. We got it for free behind the dumpster over there. It's like, what? You got a whole fucking boat made of PCV pipes? It's like, that's fucking cool.
Yeah, they're just the resourcefulness, and it is just a shame how they just wouldn't put that resourcefulness into like something, I guess, society. I mean, I don't believe in the word normal. I don't believe everyone's normal, but what I mean. They could just do
Yeah,
something.
they don't put it. They would get rewarded for it, right? And that society would see, oh, this is fucking worth rewarding for. This is something that we could use or something that we should sell or whatever. Yeah, it is a shame, and it's because they're homeless. I mean, there are people trying to build like rocket ships, like thinking they're gonna blast, out of this atmosphere. I'm just like, dude, you need some sleep, bro. You're really high. You're blasting out of this atmosphere, but in your mind, bro. Like, that thing won't even. That thing will make it up 50 feet. It's gonna fall. But you know what?
Yeah.
It's cool to try. It is sad that, I mean, back to your original question about like, is it worth trying to help these people? I think it is if they want to be helped, but about forcing them to be helped. I don't think that's possible, man, because hey, I've seen people who get incarcerated, right? And they go to jail for 3, 4, 5, 6 years, and they get out, they have a whole new fresh start. They get in a halfway house, they have a job lined up, they even have money sometimes, and it's like, and they go right back to doing it. It's like, dude, you had like 5 years sober, man. It's like, and you had a lot of time to think about this, and the second you got out, man, you were out there in the streets looking for it. And I mean, I get it because I've been, an addict myself to different things, but it's like, so it's like, it's that person is not really worth rehabilitating because I don't think you can, you really have to want to be, and unfortunately a lot of people don't ever hit rock bottom where they're just like, that's it. So, that rock bottom, I always stay just a little bit above it, and that's it. And then something happens and that's it.
I couldn't even fucking walk straight, man. I ended up sitting next to the canal, talking to myself until the sun came up. And I peaked for like 5 or 6 hours, man. Not like 1 or 2 hours, like a couple hits. I peaked like at least 5 or 6 hours. I lost all concept of reality and time. It was quite spiritual.